Assalamu alaikum and hello, my name is Hashima. Welcome to my channel, and if you're returning, welcome back to my channel. On this channel, I share conscious lifestyle inspiration for mind, body, and soul to transform and master the art of you. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure that you subscribe. Today's video is episode 2 of Married to Addiction, a series where I'm discussing my experiences being married to someone who developed a drug addiction. I am not sharing to trauma dump, to overshare, or to expose. I am sharing to benefit someone who may be in the situation now or may find themselves in the situation in the future, and also to bring clarity and understanding to those who are possibly the support system for someone in the situation, whether it is the person who is addicted or the person who is married to the person who is addicted. Okay, so this video is about the survival mode, where the daily cycle of survival and how a mother and wife is able to manage, or how we manage the situation. And this is from my perspective, of course, and my experiences, although I did, research and stuff to find out at different points, am I the only one who's experiencing this like this? So I'm going to go through it. I have some points on a piece of paper because I did not trust my memory or my ability to flow through this video with ease. So here we go. So again, this is survival mode. So this is what the daily life looks like in the trauma of it all, in the management of it all, what all goes into it, and how it impacts the people involved. So number one, managing the children. So this is a major area, because if you have children and you're in a situation where you're married to someone who has any form of dysfunction, addiction, it does not have to be just drug addiction, but something that impacts the whole family, basically. The children are a major point of stress, because and this is me talking about my personal experiences, of course, and the things that I was able to observe during the situation, but also once I got out of it, understanding how the things were impacting my children. So shielding my children from the negative impacts of the decisions that he was making. And that is whether it was, different outings that we were supposed to go on, different ways that things like addiction disrupt the natural pattern or the ability to maintain a pattern that is, healthy, thriving, all that kind of stuff. So basically, shielding them from the negative impact sometimes meant me doing the thing that we were supposed to do together, coming up with, distraction methods to distract them from the fact that we aren't doing the thing that we said we were going to do, or that we were, planning to do. Avoiding arguments in the presence of the children, because again, the behavior was unpredictable. I'm going to link the first video so that some of the things I'll be referencing from the first video. So I advise that you go watch it in order, even though I'm not doing it in a story style, but some of the things I'll be referencing from each video. So it's important to kind of follow, so when I'm referencing something else. But yeah, so avoiding arguments in the children's presence, which meant constantly suppressing or masking what I was personally going through. Now, this is something that people in, healthy marriages sometimes deal with, where you're, having some kind of situation with a spouse and you have to adjust your energy and stuff when you're around your children. But it's, of course, way worse when you are in a situation with someone who has an addiction. So I was always having to mask my emotional state to make sure that it didn't negatively impact the children, or that they weren't able to witness the effects of it on me. And also sometimes having to, that meant avoiding a lot of things in life, like whether it was talking about a bill that was due or whatever. What I realized, not only at the time, but also going through this, preparing for this series, is that I was pretty much almost single most of the time, because I was managing, and I can't even really say single, because I was carrying both of our weight most of the time. So it wasn't even like I was single, because that would be without the addition of the stress and all those things that came from being married to him. So yeah, I can't even say it was like I was single, but you understand what I'm saying. The other thing is, and this is major, children feel our energy. So especially children under a certain age, I'll say probably like maybe under 10, they feel, no, I think seven is the age of innocence, the end of innocence. So children experience or they absorb the energy around them. They are like more clean, more pure. You know, their vessels are like pretty much more clean. So they're more sensitive to outside influences. They're more sensitive to things that happen around them. And so one thing that you may notice in, you know, your regular marriage, when you and your spouse are not getting along, or you may be stressing about work or just, you know, life in general, the children will start to act out. And I remember I used to actually chuckle about it because I would be like, what now, Allah? Like, you know, it's like, oh, okay, now the baby wants me to give them all of my attention when I only have 20% left. So that's one of the things that was major, that was difficult to manage. It also caused a lot of stress, is managing my children and the way that what the stress was that was going on, the way it manifested in my children. You know, whether it was tantrums, sadness, anxiety, sleeplessness, irritability. And one of the major ways that children are indication of them absorbing the impact of an unhealthy situation is they require a lot more attention than usual. And I strongly believe that children they know something's wrong and they try to intercept it, or they try to make it better, or they try to distract you from it, or they're trying to figure out how they can help, because children are very helpful. Like, if you think about it, children are always trying to help. Even adults, they'll be like, I'll help you. You want me to get it? You want me to, are you okay? You want me to give you a hug? So imagine a traumatic situation or a situation that's extremely unhealthy. The child doesn't know where to put that energy. They're absorbing it and they don't know how to express it. They don't know where to put it. So it'll usually manifest in their behavioral problems. So that was something that I dealt with. It wasn't a lot. It was minimal enough for me not to simply leave to protect my children. Like, I strongly felt like I was protecting them for the most part, a lot. But when I knew that he was going off the deep end, sometimes it wasn't because of anything that he was necessarily doing or anything that I found out. It would be just because of how my children would be acting. And then sure enough, you know, a couple of days later, something would happen. Okay, so off of managing the children, that's a major area which makes this situation very difficult on a daily basis. The next thing was the discovery phase. The discovery phase is when you are realizing just how bad the addiction is, and that it is an actual addiction and not bad decision making, a way to cope that's not healthy, but it's not really problematic on a high level because it's not an addiction, or it doesn't. So basically, wondering if certain behaviors were tied to usage. That was a part of, I won't say every single day, but I would say on a weekly basis, I was trying to figure out if the way he was acting was him or if it was the drugs. And that's something that later on in our marriage, I ended up saying to him at some point, that I don't even feel like I know you. I know you on drugs, but I don't even know that I know you, who you actually are. Like, I haven't really been able to, I don't know, because is this you on drugs or is this you? So yeah, wondering if certain behaviors were tied to usage. That was something that I was always trying to reconcile. The next thing was trying to find non-confrontational ways to ask if he was on something. So the thing about people who are addicted, and especially if they also struggle with mental health issues, is sometimes their behavioral pattern isn't drugs, but you don't know because they're not forthcoming with the fact that they're on something. So for me, I would always be trying to figure out ways to approach certain things that needed to be dealt with without confronting him with the question of, are you on drugs right now? The other thing was, and this was really terrifying for me and was one of the major indicators, as if all these other things aren't, but I'm just being honest about the points for me where I was like, oh yeah, no, we can't do this. I can't stick around for this. And that is finding drugs in the carpet or in other places. It was never in the house, you know, living room, kitchen. It was usually in our room, in our closet, in our bathroom. But I would actually find drugs and I would research them. I wouldn't ask him because I couldn't ask him, you know, is this drugs? I didn't know back then either that he was addicted. I thought that it was a infrequent thing that he was doing that was of course problematic, but I didn't know that it was an addiction. I didn't know it was an every single day thing that he was doing. So that was one of the things about the discovery phase, which is when you start to realize, oh, this is a serious, serious thing. The next thing is having to walk on eggshells. That was a daily thing for me. I was always trying to navigate how I interacted with him, not to you know, upset him, not to get, and not to, when I say not to upset him, I don't mean being a doormat. I mean, trying to find ways to approach certain aspects of life that were necessary to interact on, or with, while not triggering him or, you know, triggering some volatile reaction or triggering a cuss out session or triggering a storm out session, or just, it was just always, and it was regular, which is why I put it on this list of daily survival, because it was something that I dealt with very regularly. The next area is managing life generally and emotionally. So you have your, you know, personality, your character, the good and bad of it. Adding drug addiction on top of that, you have the times where you kind of don't want to be bothered, or where you need, you know, to be by yourself, or where you're stressed out and you kind of need, you know, something to relieve the stress. You gotta, but add drug addiction and the symptoms of drug addiction, the side effects of drug addiction. So that was something that I had to manage regularly. Just navigating the mood swings and other side effects. One of the things that I realized is that I was not able to live, you know, life. We were not living life, but no long-term planning, the inability to stay consistent with life plans. So if we would plan something, there got up to a point where I just knew that it was pointless to plan anything, because I couldn't rely on him for sticking to the plan or executing the plan or anything. I was, again, essentially carrying us by myself. And I'm not saying that he didn't work or he didn't pay bills or any of that kind of stuff, but I'm saying when it came to making life make sense, it was difficult I couldn't rely on him to make life or help make life make sense. So long-term planning was out the window. There was no ability to stay consistent. And the interesting thing that I realized recently is that I never thought about the fact that being married to someone with a drug addiction and the way in which it altered the way I lived, the way I thought, the way I processed, I never thought about that contributing to my inconsistency in certain parts of my life. So I realized recently that no wonder I haven't ever done this, or this that was on my goal list, because I got accustomed to whatever the plan getting disrupted, not being able to execute on it, him not being in a condition to execute on it, me not being in a condition, because when you're so stressed out all the time, you don't have the clarity of thought to even do certain things. Now, I want you to keep in mind that I was a homeschooler, and I have been my children's ever since my first child. I'm a mother of 7, by the way. So I have 3 young children right now and 4 adults there was 4 stepchildren. So, and he and I have three children together. So, yeah, so I've homeschooled all of my children from the first to the last, not all the way through to high school, college, and all that. But I'm just saying, I've been homeschooling for most of all of my children's lives. So homeschooling, running a business, going to school, learning, doing that, like all of these things were happening while managing drug addiction. So yeah, The last thing in this particular area was losing touch with who I was outside of the situation. As a matter of fact, let me go back to long-term planning. So I had a business, and I remember one time, and this is long-term, no ability to plan long-term things, but also the inconsistency that occurs due to the fluctuation, the unpredictability of life in this situation. So I'm going to just give you a little brief story about what happened very, very often. Very, very often. I was doing fashion shows and running a, retail business, retail fashion business, making products and things like that. And I was preparing for a fashion show that had been in preparations for months. And it was the day of the fashion show. And I remember I was sitting at the sewing machine. I had about an hour before I had to leave, and I was already running late and all that kind of stuff. And he came home and he was in some condition. And I just remember begging him to leave me alone so that I could finish what I needed to do and get out of the house for the fashion show. And of course it didn't happen. I ended up going to the fashion show, but I'm saying he didn't leave me alone. And I was just sobbing and sewing. Like I was literally sobbing and sewing, because in that moment I was like, this is the last time that this is going to ruin my life, ruin my plans, my goals, my dreams, and I was just so, like, I couldn't, like, when I look back on it, that point in my life was a source of trauma for years, because I could not believe the pain. I was so overwhelmed with exhaustion and frustration and pain, like just from everything being ruined. Okay, I shouldn't say everything. That's absolute. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I just remember that defining moment where I was just like, okay. And the funny thing is that while it was a defining moment for me emotionally and a marker of something, it was almost like, in hindsight, it was a time where I think that may be the time where I decided I'm not even going to plan things anymore because he's going to ruin it. And I'm not saying consciously ruin it, but it's going to get ruined because of the circumstance. So I might as well just willy-nilly things and just not commit too much. And I couldn't commit to many things. Like, I would say I would do a thing, but I wouldn't be able to fulfill it. And so there got to be a point where I started doubting my own honesty or my own, follow through because of it. Okay, so try not to go too deep on every point, but yeah, I didn't even plan to tell a story. And then the other thing is losing touch with who I was outside of the situation. When, like I said, homeschooling, interacting with other people, going to, fashion shows and doing just all these different things, going to school and all this kind of stuff. There was this thing with you having to, like, I don't want to say mask, because it wasn't like I was masking. It's just that I was always very authentic. So I was just, if I was stressed, I was stressed. I very rarely carry whatever I'm carrying inside. I very rarely carry that out into the world with me. Like, I don't interact with people. If I'm stressed, I'm not mean or rude or any of that kind of stuff. But I just remember that it was very difficult to gather myself sometimes in order to do whatever the thing is that I had to do outside of the house. So that was a major part of it too, and that was very frequent. Okay, so the last section is living in denial. And that was living in denial. The person who's on drugs, the addict, lives in denial, lies, and has secrets. And that's something that they have to do to maintain the lifestyle. You cannot, if you know that the person is going to leave, if you know that people will abandon you, when you admit this thing, you have to keep it a secret. You have to lie to cover your tracks. You can't be discovered. So that was something that in the beginning, when it first started, seriously, like, became a pattern. I thought, I took it more so like, not personal, but I did take it personal, because I was like, why can't you just tell me the truth? Like, when I would find out that it was a lie, I would feel like, why can't you just tell me the truth? Why can't you be honest? But then I just felt like he was a liar at a point, which of course there's a section of life where he was turn into a liar, but I'm saying the addiction, one of the things that's very important to understand, if you're a person who is with someone with addiction, who has an addiction, or you're a family member of someone with an addiction, they absolutely have to lie to maintain the addiction. And telling you the truth will not prevent them from using. So the lies, the secrets, and when I say secrets, I mean like a secret would show up in a form of having to pretend that they're going somewhere else, but they're actually going to get drugs. So the schedule, if the schedule changes or, you know, things like that, it's oftentimes to cover the fact that they're either going to use or going to get drugs. What else? And all of this is required to maintain the addiction. And until a person decides that they're going to get off and then does something that actually will support that decision, they're going to be addicted. It's going to be a cycle of addiction and cover up, lies, secrets, manipulation, etc. And then the last thing is reframing. So that was something that I realized I was doing. And that's one of the ways in which people basically are in the situation for so long. You reframe, and this applies to any forms of addiction, being with someone who has any forms of addiction, and also being with someone who's abusive. And I'm not differentiating abuse from addiction, but I'm saying verbal abuse, physical abuse, you know, or addiction. There's something that happens with the person who's in the situation with them where they reframe. So it doesn't have to be a spouse either. It could be a parent, sibling, niece, nephew. It could be, you know, whoever cares about this person. You have a tendency to reframe the narrative so that you can accept yourself inside of the story. So you tell yourself that it's not what it actually is. You make it prettier, you make it less painful, less dramatic, less destructive, less. So that was something that I noticed was a pattern of mine as well. After something really big would happen, something really devastating would happen, the way that I would find myself on the other side of it, which I'll get into in one of the other videos, but it's like you get into this place where you are constantly restructuring what the event was so that you can move forward and feel somewhat like your life is normal. I never felt like my life was normal, but you know what I'm saying. So, okay, that's going to be it. I don't want this video to go too long. And of course, I'm going to, you know, turn it off. And when I edit, I'm going to be like, I could have said this, I could have said that. Why didn't I say this? Why didn't I say that? But I've said enough. I've said plenty. If you find yourself relating to a lot of this, I strongly advise you to not only seek counseling, but if counseling does not work, if convincing the person to enter into rehab, I was going to say rehabilitation, into rehab does not work, then leaving would be the next thing. This stuff does not go anywhere. It has to be resolved. It has to be worked on. It has to be reconciled. So yeah, if you're finding yourself, or you know someone and you see this pattern in them, it's quite possible that they're dealing with someone who has some kind of addiction, or, you know, they're being impacted by something major inside of their household. I didn't even intend to say that, but I'm just, you know, it's like I'm trying to give as much benefit as possible and help people protect themselves in this situation. But this one was just kind of taking you through what it looks like, what it feels like, how the people inside of the situation are impacted. And this is from the perspective of the person married to someone who has an addiction. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have any questions about anything, this video or the last video, that you want me to clarify or give some insight about, feel free to leave a comment below. I will answer it, as long as it's not too intrusive or, you know, doesn't expose too much, you know, personal things, then I'll go ahead and answer those questions. If you know anyone who's in the situation, share this video with them. Yeah, but that's going to be it. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.